Habemus Papam. And so now it begins, a short conclave, and now we have a pope again, and we're no longer sedevacantists. Well, at least some of us. That coming up and more on your Friday Night Addiction, but still on a Thursday, the rundown.
Really have a right to be treated respectfully.
We are unfortunately running out of time, but Peter, I just want to get one final thought from you. Are there words that are used to describe men that offend you?
Not particularly, and if there were some I don't like, I certainly wouldn't want them banned. But it always goes back to that old adage: sticks and stones may break my bones, but there will always be something to offend a feminist.
Peter Lloyd.
No, that's just obnoxious.
Peter
Sorry,
Lloyd,
you have to give me a chance to respond. That is ridiculous. No, hang on, I won't do your show again if you don't let me respond.
Go on, Kate, have a word.
Come on, that's ridiculous. I mean.
What the hell was that?
And he appears, Pope John the 23rd, the first sovereign pontiff to take the name John since the 14th century. Born nearly 77 years ago of humble Italian farm workers, one of 9 children, Pope John gives the traditional papal benediction.
Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maneat semper.
Dà una schiarita proprio al fumo. Ecco un momento, ci siamo. Annunzio vobis gaudium magnum. Nuovo Papa.
Ecco Giovanni Paolo I, successore di Paolo VI.
When Senior Cardinal Deacon Pericle Felici announced the name of the new pope, most of those in the square couldn't quite catch it. They had been listening for names like Papalardo or Ursi, Pignedoli or Colombo. This name didn't even sound Italian. Karol Wojtyła of Poland. When the new pope stepped out on the balcony to give his blessing, the cheering became intense. And as he spoke, in good Italian and down-to-earth phrases, it echoed ever more strongly across the great square. The new Bishop of Rome, he said, speaking of himself, has been called from a distant land, yet it is a land nearby in terms of communion and of faith in Christian traditions. He said he was afraid at first to accept this nomination, but he said, I have done so in the spirit of obedience to the Lord and of confidence in our Mother, the Virgin Mary. He started to say, I speak in your language, then corrected himself.
Dopo il grande Papa Giovanni Paolo II, i signori cardinali hanno eletto me, un semplice, umile lavoratore nella vigna del Signore.
For Pope Leo XIV from the United States. Let's listen.
And here we are. We're back. We are so back. There it is. All right. So Mike and James are supposed to be joining us at the bottom of the hour, so we won't quite have a replay of last week. It's just me and Alberto. So that's a plus. Adrian's joining us. Adrian, glad to have you back.
Howdy, howdy. Praise be to God. It's good to be here.
All right.
Kept down in the loggia and being applauded.
Pope Adrian the first. You know, and the deep fake video for our intros, I've got like all the boxing stuff for you. Is there anything else you want me to get in there? Because I mean, I can find something else.
No, that's fine how it is. You know, I was recently looking at I saw this video of Muhammad Ali, which, you know, he was a Muslim, so negative, but he was talking about the fashions of his time for women, and he's like, this fashion's like the miniskirt. He was criticizing the miniskirt. He was like, that is disgusting. Like the fact that you want to see my wife in a miniskirt? Absolutely not. You would never see my wife in a miniskirt. And he was like going off and on the invention of the miniskirt. It was very interesting.
Yeah, there's something similar thing with Malcolm X. It was also weird American brand of Islam, right? But then he sees the real Islam and he comes back a bit radicalized. It's probably one of the reasons why he was offed, in my opinion. But not integrally good, not promoting him, pseudo-communist in a lot of ways. But he had this thing to say about white liberals. I need to get that clip back in like our thing to run with. He said, "Why always watch out for white liberals?" And it's like, I wish black people idolize Malcolm X would listen to that and realize, yeah, you can't, don't trust the Democrats. Anyway, so enough about American. Well, I guess we are going to bring in American politics because we have an American Pope.
Sancti Apostoli Petrus et Paulus, de quorum potestate et auctoritate confidimus, ipsi intercedant pro nobis ad Dominum. Amen. Precibus et meritis Beate Mariae semper Virginis, Beati Michaelis Arcangeli, Beati Ioannis Baptiste, et Sanctorum Apostolorum Petri et Pauli et omnium sanctorum, misereatur vestri omnipotens Deus, et dimissis omnibus peccatis vestris, perducat vos Iesus Christus ad vitam aeternam. Amen. Indulgentiam, absolutionem, et remissionem omnium peccatorum vestrorum, spatium vere et fructuose penitentiae, cor semper penitens, et emendationem vitae, gratiam et consolationem Sancti Spiritus, et finalem perseverantiam in bonis operibus tribuat vobis omnipotens et misericors Dominus. Amen. Et benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos et maniat semper.
That goes on for a bit. He gives a little discourse in Italian, which actually was very nice. I'm not going to belabor everyone with the Italian with no subtitles, but so people are asking in the chat, hey, how is his Latin? So his Latin, I mean, in terms of church Latin pronunciation, is not that difficult. If you put any time at all into it, it's basically the same as Italian when you get down to it, and that's because of Pius X. Pius X. Church Latin had a bunch of traditions behind it, and we can go on. I could give you 20-minute history on that if we wanted to. But ultimately, in the 20th century, Pius X said, "Hey, all Church Latin needs to sound like Italian." It didn't quite get everyone on board, but it got a lot of people on board. So, so his pronunciation, his stresses are mostly in the right place. I only caught one thing that was slightly off and it's questionable, and nobody would have noticed, really, honestly. So it's, so that part's good anyway. In his pronunciation of the Latin's good, so he's taken some time at least to know that. There's, whereas like you see some videos of some cardinals, and you see like a Pizzaballa, who everybody wanted to, there's so many trads wanted to be made Pope. I don't know if they actually would have liked that in the end. Who knows? But he gets up and he gave his swearing his oath as a to keep the secrecy of the conclave and everything. Did a great, his Latin was perfect. Sarah's Latin was on point. Actually, his Burke is the one. I mean, Burke knows Latin fluently, by the way. And it's not like there's anything wrong with his Latin. But then he doesn't have a good Latin diction. It's very Americanized. And I mean, when I'm lazy, mine can be too. But when I'm on point, it's going to sound right, whether it's classical Latin or church Latin. So it was kind of odd seeing Burke get up there and it sounds so very Wisconsin, surprise. I mean, it's where he's from, but that is what it is. So, I mean, we got that much. He knows how to pronounce Latin. What is that? What does that tell us, Adrian? Does that tell us anything at all?
Absolutely nothing. I think the whole Latin thing is going to be a giant smokescreen. I was talking about this on my channel, Catholic Conversations, a second ago. We have to be very careful because him putting on the trappings of a traditional pope is often usable by the revolution to try to placate traditional Catholics. So I was like, oh, he does the Latin Mass, because I've heard some rumors about that. I don't know if they're true. It may or may not be. We'll see. And he says prayers in Latin. He dresses nicely. He dresses in good clothing. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad he does that. I don't want to emphasize that. It actually is a good thing that we should bring back these things that the popes have dropped to try to raise up the glory of the papacy. That's great. I'm happy about that. But we can't allow it to placate people to be like, oh, he's actually a secret trad, or oh, he's actually, or even if let's say he liberalizes the usage of Latin Mass. We can't take that as saying, oh, okay, well now let's just be okay with everything he does because we're too scared that he might take it away from us again. So we have to still keep our mind on the fact that the final goal isn't to go to Latin Mass. It's the faith, whole and entire.
Right. Well, that's precisely right. And, first I should, because Alberto and I did the stream last week and I predicted Cardinal Turkson was going to get it. And I was fairly confident in that, albeit I'm just a guy. I know as much as anyone else does. So, but I was wrong. And, I didn't see, Cardinal Provost anywhere in the list. It didn't. I knew who he was a little bit. By no means am I an expert on the guy or anything like that. But I had some vague idea who he was, at least, but not in any way that he was a contender. That didn't even drop until like this morning, practically. So, I had no idea, and there he was. But interestingly enough, our frenemies at the Pillar have a little write-up about him, and I figure it might not hurt to take a little bit of time to go with this one. Stop that. I don't need your call to action. A native of Chicago, the 69-year-old is the first pope from the United States, though he spent much of his time as a missionary in Peru. Pope Leo XIV appeared on the loggia overlooking St. Peter's Square wearing the traditional red mozzetta. In a break with custom, he initially read his address from a piece of paper, but later spoke extemporaneously. In his address, given in a confident voice, he spoke of peace, the resurrection, and the witness of his predecessor, Pope Francis. More on the sidebar, more on that in a bit. He referred to his membership of the Augustinian order, citing St. Augustine of Hippo, saying, "With you I am a Christian, and for you a bishop." Unquote. In another break with custom, he moved from Italian to Spanish, greeting his former diocese of Chiclayo. Returning to Italian, he noted that May 8th is the Feast of Our Lady of Pompeii, leading the pilgrims in the square below in the Hail Mary. He then gave the blessing Urbi et Orbi, which we saw in the video just not too long ago.
No English, by the way.
Yeah, no English. I do have a bit of English from him as a cardinal, but anyway, skip that. The new pope was elected on the 4th or 5th ballot in a conclave that stretched over 2 days. And actually, in another sidebar, I was kind of hoping it would go longer because the longer it goes, the more hopeful it might be, or worse, depending. But just because I'd love to see the thing go on like for a while.
I thought for sure it was going to be Friday. I told everybody Friday was going to be the day, and I was pretty shocked to see it go out so soon.
And actually, today is the traditional day, the apparition of St. Michael the Archangel.
Yeah, that's right.
And so part of me is thinking, hey, I actually thought about making a satirical post on Twitter and say, hey, maybe we'll get Pope Michael the second. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
It was funny. My mom texted us this morning. She was praying. She does her morning prayers. And she was like, afterwards, she goes, guys, we need to pray today. I have a feeling that the Pope will be chosen today. And I was like, nah, it's not going to be today. It'll be tomorrow, probably. Maybe even the day after. And sure enough, I was like, oh, okay. Well, there you go, folks.
Mm-hmm. Yep, there we are. So, Yes, there is that. Who knows what that actually means, if anything? But 2/3 of the eligible cardinals were necessary to select a pontiff. In this case, 89 of the 133 voting cardinals present were needed to decide the next pope. And we're not going to know how many did or didn't if they're keeping the pontifical secrets the way they should. The new pope's name was announced by the cardinal protodeacon, Cardinal Dominique Mamberti. The last pope to bear the name Leo XIII, died in 1903. When Robert Francis Prevost was growing up in Chicago in the 1960s, a steady stream of priests passed through his family home. They were drawn by the irresistible dishes prepared by his mother, Mildred Martinez, who was of Spanish descent. Proximity to clergy wasn't the only reason he considered the priesthood in his youth. There was also the example of his father, Louis Marius Provost, who had French and Italian roots and served as a catechist. The youngster also had a positive experience of parish life, serving as an altar boy and attending a parish school. Oh yeah, it's like the two memes, hey, I was an altar boy, therefore I now can pontificate on these issues I know nothing about. Or again, hey, I went to Catholic school. But anyway, no, he's obviously got a better pedigree than that. Once he was convinced of his call to the priesthood, he faced another discernment challenge. Should he become a diocesan priest or join a religious order? After wrestling with the decision, he opted to join an Augustinian minor seminary.
Why is this written like a hagiography?
That's the interesting thing. Hold on, who wrote this? It just says The Pillar. It doesn't even have an author on it. All right, anyway. Oops, passed too much. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. And of course, to note, Father Martin, our venerable emeritus member of this program, is also an Augustinian. Although, it's too bad we're unable to get him on. I'd be curious to get his thoughts on an Augustinian pope.
Yeah, he texted me though. I was talking to him earlier today, and he said, Leo XIII, we shouldn't assume anything traditional by it. He said, Leo XIII beatified many Augustinians because he was raised and taught by Augustinians, hence the choice by an Augustinian. So Father Martin thinks that it's nothing to do with like, oh, he's actually a secret trad. It's more of a Augustinian thing that he is choosing Leo.
That makes sense. And honestly, if it wasn't the Augustinian angle, the only other thing I could think of is connecting himself to Leo XIII's social teaching. But even that, it's like, well, John Paul II did that really heavily as well.
Yeah.
So there's nothing specifically new or different in that per se. I doubt that, in the moments, you're elected and you're sitting there, taking the name. I mean, there would have been a certain point when he would have realized that he's gaining ground. How that happened exactly, we don't know. And then, at some point he would have had to think about his name. And then, or maybe he walked in, thinking, well, I'm not going to get elected, but if I am, I guess Leo. And why? Well, the only thing he would think of is as an Augustinian, Leo XIII, but beatifying Augustinians, that would probably be the thing. But, I mean, it could be a bunch of things. Based on his life and his cred, I don't believe it has anything to do with any secret tradism.
I don't think so.
No, especially when we look at his relationship with Francis. But
I think it's counter signaling. I think it's a number of things. I think it's like several of these things. I think he's trying to, because he knows he's an American. He's very aware of the American, like what we're doing, commentary world. I think there's just more Catholic commentators, writers, bloggers, newspapers, magazines than pretty much anywhere else in the world, especially of a trad bent. So if he can gain some of those people onto his side early on, I think that's kind of part of his thinking. I bet it's a number of things, but I think that's one element.
The counter signaling is probably likely to a certain extent, because I mean, if you've been paying attention to anything, the politics in the church, and especially if he's seen things like prominent JP2 people like Joseph Seifert pushing Vigano all of a sudden and saying things about the papacy that were unimaginable for someone like Joseph Seifert to say. And I talked about that a little more with Alberto last week. Who in their right mind would ever think Joseph Seifert would be coming out pushing Vigano's stuff and saying, yeah, maybe Francis wasn't even legitimate, and that's it's great. So they're aware of this counter signaling, even because it's not just a trad thing anymore. That's what one of the things that the Beneficantism shows, and again, the people who've aligned themselves to Vigano, Strickland, whatever, is and of course, there was a comment earlier. He was actually involved in removing Strickland, from what I'm hearing. I have not been able to demonstrate that yet as a fact, but
what we know for sure was that he was the head of the dicastery for bishops at the time.
It's impossible he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, it's possible. We don't have, and Strickland hasn't come out and said anything about it. He just basically came out and said, pray for him. But yeah, all we know is that he was the head of the dicastery for bishops at the time. And so he likely had a role in it, but we don't know for sure.
No, we don't. And so let's see, there's more of the background. And part of the reason reading this, just to kind of lay the ground with some actual facts. And because, like I said, I knew a little bit about the guy. I certainly didn't know, I'm no expert in him, in his life or anything like that. And of course, now there's going to be all these people who are experts and then the new Pope, right? But after completing his studies, he was invited to work in the territorial prelature of the Chuluacanas in northwestern Peru, which is a strong connection with the U.S. Augustinians. He traveled all over the country, taking in the jungle, the mountains, the coast, sealing a love of the nation that would culminate in him becoming a naturalized citizen. In the space of a decade, Prevost served as a community prior, director of formation, teacher of the professed, judicial vicar, and professor.
Do we know what his ethnicity is?
From what I read, on his mother's side, Spanish, and his dad's side, French and Italian.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know how many generations that's in. Is he like a second, generation American, first generation American from immigrant parents? I actually don't know.
Okay.
Let's see. In 2001, Prevost was selected prior general of the Worldwide Augustinian Order, a post he held for 2 6-year terms. So 12 years as a worldwide head of the Augustinians. I imagine Father Navarro has some things to say about him.
Yeah, because Father Navarro would have been in the novitiate at that time, wouldn't he?
Well, yes. Let's see. Because he was in an order in Rome that eventually got suppressed under Francis. So it might have been the tail end. But when he was in the Augustinians, a few years after that, he would have known something about it. I'm just looking to see if I can raise him real quick. Maybe it'd be great to get. I don't know if he would come on, but anyway, Prevost was appointed a member of the dicastery for bishops in 2020. Oh, wait, I skipped something. 2014, Pope Francis named him apostolic administrator of the Chiclayo diocese, bringing him back to northwestern Peru. A year later, Prevost became bishop of the diocese that covers one of Peru's biggest cities, as well as shanty towns and rural areas. And so they're really hitting on like the Francis thing, and that's actually going to be important, like the peripheries, right, or at least certain ones. Individuals in the Chiclayo diocese would later accuse Prevost of failing in 2022 to open an investigation into their accusations of abuse against 2 priests. The diocese vigorously denied the claim when the cases made international headlines in 2024. Prevost was appointed a member of the dicastery for bishops in 2020, as in he's one of the guys who's appointing all new bishops around the world.
Yep.
Later, Pope Francis told him he was thinking of selecting him as the department's head, making him responsible for the selection of the world's Latin Rite bishops, except mission territories covered by the dicastery for evangelization. Prevost told the Pope, quote, "Whether you decide to appoint me or to leave me where I am, I will be happy. But if you ask me to take on a new role in the church, I will accept." Prevost's attitude was shaped by the vow of obedience he made when he committed himself to the Augustinian order. He had grasped the vow's importance as a seminarian when a wise elderly priest told him, "As a young man, it will be harder for you to live celibacy. But later, you'll see that living obedience is the most difficult thing." Prevost resolved to always do what he was asked, both within the order and the wider church. You're right. It does read like a hagiography.
Right. But it's very weird.
Yeah.
Very, very weird. I'm like, why?
And this is all ready to go within hours of him being elected.
Yeah. And he's like, the way they're crafting the phrases, it's very much like, like talking about him as if he's dead and talking about him as if he's like, oh, he made this wise decision.
Yeah,
like, how do you know it's a wise decision?
This is like, you read the life of Cardinal Baronius, you read the life of St. Bellarmine, you read the life, of Aloysius Gonzaga, and so on and so forth. And this reads like that, honestly. And of course, which for as much as they're putting in, there's so much they're leaving out. During their conversation about the bishop's dicastery, Pope Francis asked Prevost to pray that I make a good decision. And in 2023, the Pope named him prefect, succeeding the Canadian Cardinal Marc Ouellet. As prefect, Prevost also served as president of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America, a role for which he was well prepared. Now, let's pause here. Let's call to mind priests in Latin America or bishops that got removed. And the reason they got removed is they established seminaries and had vocations because they were running a traditional style seminary. They had a lot of priests. They were saying masses in Latin. A lot of priests who were preaching Orthodox doctrine. And like, what was that place? It was a former French colony that I can't remember it right now. And Francis just outright fired the bishop. And that was like one of the only places that had vocations. And other Latin American bishops were basically complaining that he was making them look bad because he had vocations and they didn't. And, and again, Cardinal Prevost would have had a role in that. Prevost saw his task as that of identifying men who embodied Pope Francis's ideals for bishops, prelates with strong relationships with God, supposedly, their brother bishops, priests, and flocks, except when that doesn't align with Pope Francis's other ideals, I guess. His job was complicated by an ever-rising refusal rate among priests tapped to be bishops. This is a thing we're going to return to in a little bit, so put a pin in that for later. When Prevost received a cardinal's red hat a few months into his tenure, he expressed regret that he now had so little spare time. I consider myself quite the amateur tennis player, he told the interviewer. Since leaving Peru, I've had few occasions to practice, so I'm looking forward to getting back on the court.
Well, he may not have much time anymore.
Yeah, definitely not going to have much time anymore.
Why include that? Why include that comment? This whole thing reads in such a weird way. This whole thing.
You know what I'm reminded of? I remember things about Bergoglio when he was cardinal in Buenos Aires, things that were not flattering to his character, things that I had read. And then when he was elected, I was following up on these things and I was finding them, and then they were gone. All of a sudden, things about his covering up for abuse, things about how he had, punished priests for like seemingly no reason, basically for being too orthodox. Other occasions where, Bergoglio had done really questionable things, stuff that, about his character, like he would boast about taking the bus in such a way, like he'd go to a meeting, oh, the buses take so long, like emphasizing, so that he rode the bus like a normal guy and he didn't have all these trappings of nobility and all these things like other cardinals. It's like, yeah, he made that like a point of showing I'm better than you because I have these things. And all that stuff disappeared within about a month of Francis being elected. There were a couple of exposés they just disappeared, gone off the internet. Books that were written like about his malfeasance in certain things, especially back under the Junta, back in the 80s, gone, all gone. Couldn't find him anymore. And I'm thinking, if the dirt is out there on Prevost,
it won't happen this time.
Disappearing at a rapid rate.
It's too much. We live in a different era.
Yeah,
we did at the beginning of the Francis pontificate. You can't hide it the same way they did before.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we mentioned before, the commentary sphere has grown so much over the Francis pontificate, and the willingness to criticize clergy has grown as much as well. I mean, back then, who did you really have before the Francis pontificate? You had Michael Matt.
Yeah.
You had did Lifesite News exist already at that point?
It was
covering
around.
Church stuff already.
Yeah, it was around, and then a few trad commentators.
Yeah, there wasn't much.
Not a whole ton, and you had Catholic Answers, obviously, and then you had a few other small.
EWTN, but they weren't going to say anything like that.
Right? No, certainly not about Benedict.
Yeah,
and then. And then under the Francis pontificate, that kind of made it's kind of like you think about like with film criticism, there were nerds and people in that sphere talking about stuff. But when Hollywood went woke, and then when Trump got elected is when Hollywood went total TDS, and you could see it in all the crap they're producing. And that's when all the political alignment now hits film commentary, criticism, comic book criticism, all these things. And now all of a sudden, it's like a bad movie is going to create 100 YouTube channels.
Yep.
and that's because of woke Hollywood, right? And practically every presso nero, every airplane press conference that Francis gave is now creating, another 10, 15, Catholic commentators on the Pope. And then he had Taylor Marshall go trad at a certain point where, I mean, he pretty much was like Michael Lofton, honestly, 2013, 2014, 2015. And then he starts to make the move trad. And then, and say what you will about Taylor Marshall. Like, I know him, I have known him personally. I haven't been, in contact with him for a while, but he was honest, and he even came out and apologized to trads for having been so harsh with them in the past. And so it's like, and I give him lots of credit for that, because that's a hard thing. It's hard enough to reverse yourself in public. It's even harder to come out and say, hey, I was wrong about this. And, because it damages your cred, right? I was wrong. And,
yeah. Well, if he apologizes about being mean to trads, and why did he orchestrate the election of Louis XIV?
Yeah, I know. Are you really sorry? That's right. Oh my goodness. So yes, there is all that. Where are our fellow contributors? Because they were all supposed to be here.
They're never going to join. They
probably,
they dipped on us.
Yeah, so let me just send a text real quick. But anyway. So before I get in and launch into something else, what are your observations in general?
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of observations. I think the biggest thing is we have to look. We need to be careful about, we don't want to be uncharitable, of course, 100%. But what I was talking about earlier on my channel was there's a certain group of people, and a lot of them are new Catholics, and so I understand where they're coming from, but they say things like, oh, we shouldn't be criticizing, we should give them the benefit of the doubt, and we should just wait and see what happens with this papacy. And they're acting as if the Pope just drops out of the sky and he's this unknown character who never existed before, and now he's the Pope. No. He has a track record as a cardinal, as a bishop, as a prior of an international order, as a priest, as a seminarian. He has a history, and we should be able, unless he comes out and says I'm going in a different direction, I'm having a conversion of heart, I'm not the man I was before. Unless there's something that signals that there's a discontinuity between him as a cardinal and him as Pope, we should be able to say, let's judge him by his fruits. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, we don't want to judge him off of things that are not relevant. So, people judging him, oh, he has a Chicagoan accent, the way he says, in the name of the Father. Okay, well, Chicagoan accents are weird. Okay, whatever. Who cares? Yeah. So, yeah, in that sense, yeah, we don't need to be overly critical, but we should be able to judge things he said and done by the light of church teaching. Not our own personal judgment, because people are saying, you're coming up with these things with your own personal judgment and judging the Pope. We're judging it based off of church teaching, not my teaching.
That's for you and James. James, our base Nigerian trad.
How's everyone doing today?
Doing fantastic. We have a Pope.
Habemus Papam.
Habemus Papam. What do you got to say about that?
Well, I've gotten myself into some trouble, of course.
No.
I know.
This group of people never get in trouble.
Of course. By merely giving my unbiased, first impressions, I, of course, had said this for a while. The idea that we don't expect there to be some sort of bureaucracy, politicking, or whatever it is, shenanigans going on behind the scenes before the actual start of the conclave is, a little simplistic. This sort of shenanigans has been going on for ages. We all remember the Medicis, and all that was happening at that time in Italy. There's always brokering going on. But my concern was before going into the conclave, you'd hear people say things like, oh, this person's out or this person's in, and And I kind of saw that as a little, I mean, I never commented on these things because you just don't know exactly who's putting the news out there, who's feeding who, and who's the direct source of whatever information that you're hearing. But what I kind of knew was that Supich and a few others basically had a block of votes. So that part is understandable. And then the fact that Francis himself had 108 cardinals as electors. It's just kind of like it's kind of a give in, It's going to be one of those Francis bishops that are going in because honestly, when you hear talk of someone like Parolin, and this is them actually speaking to the media now, going, yes, we need a Francis II, and these are the people in control of that major voting bloc. You kind of have to go, well, yeah, sure. But then here's where people got confused. People thought that by assuming that the huge names out there like Parolin or maybe Tagle, out there or whatever, that's what people were going to be getting. Those are the people the Cardinals were going to be getting behind. No, but the curveball is, you already know these candidates, right? So you already have your assessment of these candidates, and that's what they don't want. They don't want you to know the assessment of these candidates. They want you, if you're from Africa or if you're from other parts of the world, that you haven't even heard of, people like Prevost, for instance, and you see him as sort of a centrist in the mind that has been created for you by these people who are running the show. Well, they tell you, you don't want Sarah, he's too controversial. You don't want Parolin, he's made a splash for himself. You don't want Tucho, even though that's really what they want. But because there's too much attention on these people, they can't slide him in. They can't slide him in, So when you can't slide them in, what's the next best thing? Hey, get a sleeper guy in there. No one knows him. We'll just sort of bolster him as somebody who's a centrist. We'll put him out there. And that's my initial analysis of the whole thing. It's this, and I said this on my Twitter feed, and this is just Chicago politicking, and applause for Supich for getting together. I think this has his imprint all over. Now it doesn't mean that Leo the 14th can't basically break from these people who've put him in there. Doesn't mean that he can't come to his own while on the throne. We know this obviously because of the story of Pope Pius IX and how his reign went. So we always pray for the best, but we have to be cautiously optimistic. We don't want to just go, like with Francis, it took people maybe about 5 years before they started realizing that this is who he is, dyed in the wool, Right. And people were
talking about that with someone like Taylor Marshall, who was basically like a Catholic, slightly more Catholic,
and he's acknowledged it. He's acknowledged that
we mentioned that, and he even apologized to Trad.
Absolutely, he's acknowledged that he was in that camp for way too long than he should have been. But that's the impression, right? You're a son of the church if you truly are sort of behind the Pope. Like if you're like number one Pope respecter, then you're a true son of the church, and that's just not the reality. What's really scary to me is, we have this Leo the 14th now coming out, and people are doubling down on how they reacted in 2013. And I'm thinking, you can still pray for the guy, but you can still not be blind to his past, to what he said in the past, what he's done in the past. But they're bringing up things in 2012 when he talks about, the ideology of, homosexual unions, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Come on, guys. That was 2012. That was before Francis was elevated. And now he's talking about the synodal process, the synodal church today, And what does that tell you? It tells you this is a continuation of Francis. But we can hope. That's the thing, right? So we can criticize somebody. We can look at their works and we can see how their works are lacking. We can see how their works perhaps are not, the best way to move the church. Really, but should the church be moved? The church should obviously not be moved in the direction. Well, what are we looking at here? Babylon.
Babylon Bee satirical post, which pretty much hits it on the nose. I think.
Honestly, I kind of hate the Babylon Bee, but that's pretty funny.
Well,
not gonna lie.
and this is actually not as bad as our friends at the Daily Wire.
Oh, good.
They do.
You know, we're posting today.
We want
you
to
know.
play the video. I'll go hunt the video if you want to play.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, do you want to? Which video are you talking about?
Go, Matt Walsh.
He's gonna pull it up. Oh no! Here we go.
Well, I mean, have you already watched it on the show tonight?
No.
Okay.
No, we haven't done it yet. The only thing we did the intro, which is like a montage of popes coming on the loggia since Pius XII, and then I did a few funny things, and we read the write up in the Pillar, which reads like Adrian and I were both noting, reads like a hagiography of the guy.
Oh,
It's
wow.
like, how do they have this thing written up almost like the life of some saint within like an hour of the guy being elected? It's rather curious how that is.
Maybe it's a AI assisted artical.
That could be. That could be. To be honest,
We don't know.
That's probably the simplest explanation.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. You don't have to dismiss that. But here's my other criticism before, and I'll let you play that video. My other criticism is people are saying, well, at least he's dressed as conservatively as, you know, and as regally as Benedict XVI did, unlike Francis. And I'm thinking, well, do you know if someone like James Martin were basically raised to the throne of Peter, or if someone like Parolin were in that position, that's exactly what they would have worn. Francis was just an anomaly. Francis wanted to do things his own Francis way, you know, so it doesn't matter what the Pope looks like when he comes out. Obviously, we all hope he looks very papal in his regal attire and whatever it is. Ryan, you probably have a more official, name for what's the name of the red, or is it red or
the red Mosetta? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yes. And so great that he's wearing that, but come on, we're really looking that he doesn't perpetuate what we've seen the last 13 years. That's the most important thing. But he hasn't said anything yet, but doesn't mean that we cannot look back into his cardinal years and his years as a bishop. I'm sorry, his years as a bishop and his years as a priest. Right, that's what I wanted to say. There's layers and layers of videos now coming out. And
but here's one actually. I can't remember what's in this one, but he's speaking in English, so it'd be more beneficial to our listeners.
One of the things that I certainly have learned more about in the process of the synod is the, if you will, wide varieties of understanding the ministry of the bishop, sometimes determined by cultural factors, sometimes determined, of course, by personal issues, personality, the character of the bishop. But above all, and around or underneath all of that, has to be a foundation of who a bishop is called to be. And as Pope Francis has reminded us many times, a bishop is called to serve. His authority is service. And so to look for different ways in which a bishop can serve in any given society, in any given church, I think is very important. The bishop is not supposed to be a little prince sitting in his kingdom, but rather called authentically to be humble, to be close to the people he serves, to walk with them, to suffer with them, and to look for ways that he can better live the gospel message in the midst of his people.
More synodality.
Yeah,
more synodality.
Right.
You know, a couple of positive things hidden behind milquetoast synod stuff. You know, it's like, on the one hand, what's one of the biggest things priests complain about today? Well, their bishops more like an administrator that they're in fear of, that's a tyrant, rather than like a father. And you read the lives of very saintly bishops, they're like fathers to their priests. And like you read in Life of St. John Fisher, that any priest that had any need, he was immediately present like a father. Any priest that had done wrong trembled at the sound of horse hooves. That would very well mean John Fisher was coming to read him the riot act and kick him out of his parish. So St. Robert Bellarmine too, the same way with his priest when he was the bishop in Capua, a short time, but people remembered that as a really blessed time when he was the bishop there. So there's something to say. And one of the big crises of the church since Vatican II is a crisis of bishops. The identity of bishops at a time when supposedly Vatican II is giving more power to bishops. they have less power. When it's supposed to be giving more of the role of the bishop for caring for his diocese, they're further away, hidden away in chanceries that don't actually, get out and meet people. And I don't know what kind of bishop, Prevost was to his people. Hopefully it was a good one. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but the words that he used concern me. I was talking about this earlier as well, was the language in regards to like, oh, bishops shouldn't be princes in their castles, except they are princes of the church.
Yes.
Now, obviously, these things can be read in an orthodox manner. Should they be like very overly pompous, like the Victorian England style? Okay, no, of course not. But they should still be having a regality to them that is according to their state in life, which is as a prince of the church. And that's very important because
just look at how everyone's responding to how he's dressed. He pronounced Latin extremely well, at least as far as that goes. And hold on a second. Our Chief Diversity Officer, Major Parrott.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, fabulous. I missed what you guys have said, but I'm sure there's something I can get riled up about.
I don't doubt it.
Without a doubt.
I don't doubt it at all. But maybe you can give something to the fact that it's now known, people forgot this in 2023, but now it's coming again out in the news, that the head of the dicastery of bishops at the time of Strickland's removal was the now sitting pontiff, Leo the 14th. Do you have any comment to that? He met with Francis to discuss Strickland, and shortly after that meeting, Strickland was dismissed. What do you think about that? What can you say?
Well, look, I think that he needed to be involved in sacking Strickland because that gave him credibility on his left flank. And with Strickland almost at that point in time questioning the very legitimacy of Frank, it was really an easy decision for anyone who look, if you're like just mainstream Novus Ordi, Strickland had to go, and he was the one who took the credit of doing it. But that's really, frankly, an easy decision.
Right.
So I think it was actually politically astute of him to do that. It solidified his left flank, and now I think that gives him some breathing room to. Here we are.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's what I think too. Adrian, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, I think that he's. It's very likely that he was the orchestrator for a lot of these things. We don't know for sure, so I don't want to. Someone's going to be like, "Oh, Adrian claimed this." His name was signed on the document, so whether or not it was someone in his office or it was him directly, he was involved. But it definitely seems like he was politicking. He's trying to gain favor. And the other thing that's very concerning about this is that if it's true that he was trying to get Strickland removed, what does that mean for him as a legislator, as Pope? Is he going to be very liberal in getting rid of bishops and priests that he doesn't like? Is he going to say oh yeah, this bishop is talking bad about me? Gone. Simple as that. It seems as though he's kind of positioning himself as someone who's going to be a dialoguer, someone who's going to be more moderate, but at the same time, his history shows that he can just get rid of people if he finds them to be threatening to them. So I guess we'll see.
Here's part of the article I'm referencing from the Pillar. It starts here. Having been presented with that request on November 9th, 2023, Bishop Strickland declined to resign from office. Thereafter, on November 11th, 2023, the Holy Father removed Bishop Strickland from the office of Bishop of Tyler. Strickland's removal from office by the Pope follows a September 9th meeting between Pope Francis and Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, OSA, head of the Dicastery of Bishops, and Cardinal Christophe Pierre, Apostolic Nuncio to the United States, to discuss the Apostolic Visitation's results. The Pillar reported in September that the cardinals conveyed a recommendation to the Pope that Strickland be asked to resign from office in light of results of the Apostolic Visitation of the Tyler diocese.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
there's-
look,
yeah, go ahead.
in 20, sorry, I cut you off, but in 2023, and this is still true today in 2025, the two religions cannot coexist with each other. So to whatever extent Bishop Strickland became an enlightened traditionalist, let's say,
right,
and to whatever extent Bishop Strickland then started to look at Pope Francis and say, well, you're not legitimate, question maybe the conclave, or the old religion cannot coexist with the new religion. Now, that may not be true forever. Like, there could be miraculous and divine intervention, and this guy could just be like Blessed Pius IX, who like low expectations, way overperformed, and maybe that's going to be the case. But as of now, and as of 2 years ago, if you wake up, if you red pill and you are a bishop, you can't be in the church anymore. So like, I don't even see it as a matter of like, Cardinal Provost got rid of someone he didn't like. No, he got rid of someone who is not a member of the Novus Ordo religion anymore. Like, he purged someone who is a heretic of the Novus Ordo religion. So like,
that's a good way to look at it.
it's a very actually a routine action. I don't even think it's controversial. In fact, I think he should have done it.
Well, yeah, because you're right. Because their idea is for a new synodal church, and if you're not behind that new synodal church, then of course they have to remove you from office. If you're not going to support that agenda, then why are you there? And this is basically them shoring up for themselves that this new church will in fact grow roots and will continue even after the passing of the then present pontiff, of the then pontiff Francis, and with everything that's come to light today, meaning the results of this conclave, it's easy to now see. For instance, we have video of the brother of Leo the 14th talking about how he was sure a couple of days ago that his brother was on the short list.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, just because like I know Bishop Strickland actually watches this show, and I know that this clip is going to get sent to him. And Your Excellency, I mean, we tangentially know each other. I'm not saying you should have been sacked. Other than just like, you knew what the stakes were. You said what you said. You took the position that you took. It was courageous. But like, we all kind of knew that it was inevitable. There's only one conclusion.
Well, it's just like Vigano. If Francis is Pope, and then you have a former, head of the Vatican, city state in terms of its civil administration, former nuncio of the United States, now out there saying, with his troll treatise, J'accuse, right? He's out there saying, hey, Francis isn't really even the Pope, and just calling him Bergoglio and mocking him. Well, if you're the Pope and you believe you're the Pope, what else are you going to do except excommunicate him? That's actually a natural thing. If and so on and so forth.
So
and that's not to minimize. I don't want to minimize. As somebody who has been sacked, like, I don't want to minimize it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, it's no big deal that like Bishop Strickland got sent to early retirement or whatever. It is a big deal, and he went through it, and he demonstrated courage, and like all of those things, and all those things are true. But at the same time, they were also very foreseeable. Like, it didn't take a lot of insight or
that's true, but I think there is a big difference between the Vigano situation and the Strickland situation, because even though Strickland was very critical of the Francis pontificate, he was still very much and this wasn't like, because I saw some people in the comments like attacking Strickland for being like, oh, he's actually inside. I think White Wolf was making a comment about that.
I knew you were going to say White Wolf. And it's like, who else could it be?
Yeah, right, exactly. And I've
thanks
met
be to God.
Strickland.
Thanks be to God. While I'm driving, I cannot see the comments. White Wolf, you can say whatever you want to me. I'll never read it, buddy. Just so you know.
The thing is, I've met Strickland on a number of occasions in person. He's one of the only bishops who ever given me his cell phone number. And I disagree with him on a lot of things, especially in regards to, like, he still celebrates the Novus Ordo, for instance, and these kind of situations.
Right.
But he genuinely believes these things. He's not faking it. Like, he genuinely thinks there's nothing wrong with the Novus Ordo. He genuinely thinks that TLM is good. He genuinely, like, all these different ideas, he has them, and he really and truly believes them, and he is actually living out those beliefs in real time. And so his reaction to Francis and the words he was saying, like, because he wasn't denying that he was a pope. He was saying that he's doing things that are unpapal, and he's doing all these things, but he still was on board with synodality, not the bad parts of synodality, but aspects of it. He's still on board with the Catechism of the Catholic Church, with JP2, with Benedict XVI, with Reform of the Reform, with Communio, all these ideas. And so he gets sacked. And that's a huge signal that not even small criticism is acceptable. Because Vigano, okay, that I understand. It's like, okay, you're questioning whether or not you're like attacking him as a pope. So if you're the pope and you like you mentioned, if you believe you're pope and you're being attacked and said you're not pope, well, yeah, I'm going to get rid of you for sure. But that kind of person, what happened to synodality? What happened to listening? What happened to charity?
Well, look, you have to assume that for the last 2, 3, 4 years, people have been planning for Francis's demise. Okay,
of course,
so that's premise number one. Premise number two is you got like what 6, 7, 8, 9 American cardinals, almost a critical mass of where it's a legitimate voting bloc that they can throw their weight around. A couple Americans had infiltrated, to the highest degrees. Number three, you have
ways.
in McCarrick-esque, Bernardine, the legacy lives on. So this is a multi-generational struggle for these types of people, and so I think for to shore up the American bloc, BLOC, Soviet style. He had to slit Strickland's throat in order to maintain credibility with the McElroys and the Whirls and the Supiches and the African Queen. And so as a result, I think he walks into the conclave with Dolan backing him, and the good news today is that Dolan can now get back in front of a camera. He had a 48-hour reprieve from being in front of a camera. I know it's like Michael Voris without a microphone. Okay, it's like a fish with no water.
Leave Dolan alone.
Did you notice how many people were, even Sammons is up there, hey, Dolan is going to be, Dolan would be a much better pope than, and agreed, he's not wrong when you're looking at someone like Tagle, or people like that. But at the same time, it's like, but look at Dolan historically. The guy, goes into a diocese, puts a little block of cheese on his head to give his opening sermon as a bishop.
Yeah,
and he gets on there. He's always talking about Ramadan and our Muslim brothers and all this stuff.
While
eating about traditional Catholic men.
Can I give credit where credit is due on the American thing though? Because he's not going to listen to this because Trad Pat is it's past his bedtime. The boomers turn into a pumpkin at this hour, and they go to bed. But Trad Patrick called me literally the day that Francis died. And he says, it's going to be Dolan or another American. And I said, you're crazy. You're doubly crazy. It'll never be Dolan, and it will never be an American. That was my response.
I said that last week. If you saw the show with Alberto and I should have clipped it so I could mock myself a little bit. But that is the conventional wisdom.
I said two things for sure. I said, I have no idea who it's going to be, but I know two things for sure. It was not going to be someone young, and it's not going to be an American. And I was wrong on both accounts.
Yeah. Well, 69. He's not.
That's young for a
Cardinal. In the modern day, that is fairly young. But the conventional wisdom for a number of years has been an American will never get it. The idea because America has so much power in the world. The idea of seeing someone from the United States now occupying the papacy that would look like America's controlling everything, and just that appearance is something we don't want. And that actually brings up something. So why go with an American, even if he's the guy that you think is going to carry on the Francis legacy, that, he's there, he's been in Latin America mostly, but he's from Chicago. He's an American. And I think there's something hidden, again, back to what we mentioned earlier about how Hollywood changed because of TDS and started producing stuff because of Trump derangement syndrome. Well, let me play this.
What greater honor could there be? And we're a little bit surprised, but very happy. It's just a great, absolutely great honor.
Mr. President.
So there is, I don't have it up here. Hold on a second. I'm going to share the screen. So back not terribly long ago, this is former Cardinal Prevost, now Pope, going after J.D. Vance when he was talking about what frankly was just a basic explication of Catholic social teaching on how we deal with other people, the Ordo Amoris, and the way Vance laid it out. Now, granted, the way the Trump administration is going about immigration is another question, but the way he laid it out, in principle, there was nothing against any Catholic doctrine, and Prevost was amongst those who reacted. Oh no, you can't say this, and J.D. Vance is wrong. I almost wonder if the reason we have an American such as Prevost as Pope is because you need an American to fight Trump. And that
I don't know.
Why would Europeans choose an American? So you needed a major European bloc to get behind Prevost. Why get a European bloc behind someone from the United States, unless it's because the thinking is you need an American to fight Trump, and that's the thinking among the Europeans.
I disagree, because that would be incredibly. I mean, maybe they're dumb. Maybe they're dumb, but I think it would be incredibly dumb for the Cardinals to be so short-sighted to think of the next 4 years when electing a man who's 69 years old, because Trump's going to be gone in 4 years. The papacy is going to be around. He's going to be Pope for the next 10 to 20 years, probably like around 15 maybe if we're unlucky.
But
I can't imagine
the media and the internet and the way the news cycle works, people are horribly short-sighted.
I think, I mean, for me, I think of the more larger geopolitics, scale there. When I'm looking at the way the world is now trending towards war, and World War III at that, I'm wondering what role does a pontificate by a Leo the 14th take? What does it look like? Because even for Francis's faults, or however you may enumerate them, one of them was not pushing for war. And so are we now giving the assent to the global elites that Ukraine is going to be a sure thing, for instance? That's kind of where I'm leaning. I don't know.
I don't think that's an unreasonable question. I mean, look at all the events of today. Today is the anniversary of VE Day, which is American victory over Europe. America conquered Europe, and we celebrate it today, and we just put an American into the papacy. It's also the anniversary of a apparition of Saint Michael.
And, absolutely.
I mentioned that earlier before you guys got on.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. And Leo the 13th, his prayer to Saint Michael, all that. But one of the things that Leo the 13th is so well known for, especially here in America, is Testem Voluntatie, which is a rebuke of Americanism. And now this guy takes the name of the guy who is rebuking Americanism, an American rebuking Americanism. Maybe that fits into what you're saying, Ryan. That
that makes much more sense to me.
A counterbalance against the Orange Man and the successor of the Orange Man and whoever else,
What?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what that point makes a lot more sense to me, and that's what I was thinking. Specifically, what Vidal Dragoon said. He said the Pope is American because there is a need to control the narrative coming from the professional Catholics. I think that is much more likely to be true. This whole movement to try to suppress the American trad movement, like America is the trad movement, and not just the trad movement, the conservative movement as a whole.
Bar none.
It's vastly American, the
France is the
vast
cradle,
majority.
but we're the voice and the presence.
Exactly, and the money, and they're
Right.
losing the money. So I can see them choosing him for the money reason and for the Catholic influence. America, for some reason, is the Catholic megaphone of the world for some reason, and he wants to control that megaphone. I think that's what it is, more than anything else.
Right.
And probably that's why he refused to speak a lick of English from the balcony. I mean, he spoke 3 languages, none of which were English, his native tongue.
You would think that he would look to his native country and give them something to basically hold on.
He stopped to speak in Spanish because of the countries where he's been a bishop in Latin America.
Well, that's my point. So you're exactly right.
It's a short thing, Now, if it was me, the entire thing would have been in Latin.
Yes.
And you're gonna get along with the Latin. Damn it. That would be how I would deal with it. But
wait, Ryan, was it me or was he he was vastly prepared for the balcony? Like he wrote a whole victory lap speech.
I think he did actually. It almost like it was pre-prepared, honestly.
Yes.
And because it was too well polished, like even Francis, I don't think Bergoglio actually expected it, even though he after given certain leaks we got from the last conclave, he had spoken a certain way, and then everything started to go in his direction. And whether that was contrived or it was legit, who knows? I don't know. But
it's very easy for me to call.
Wasn't prepared, and you got there. Right. Buonasera, and then all his extemporaneous remarks are. Right. Bergoglio, it's fine, but it wasn't like this pre-prepared thing. Prevost's thing was a bit too polished, in my opinion. That's just my thought. Yes.
Yeah, someone is now saying
I'd have the deacons translate what I say in Latin into Koine Greek. All right, beside that.
Right. Now rumors are going to fly around about how he says the Latin Mass privately. That's what
it's already happening. It's already happening. There's already stuff going on.
I'm going to see pictures. Pixar didn't happen.
Yeah. That's exactly my point.
But he says Latin Mass
on Twitter, and I said, "Non ci credo."
Exactly. Right. So he says the Latin Mass privately, but then he's talking about a synodal church. I don't know.
No. We're likely to see in terms of the traditional Mass from him. The jailers of the tradition will stay in place. Yes. Nothing's going to happen to that document. Nothing further will happen to it, and he's just going to hope it all goes away while he focuses on Abrahamic houses and all that business. He's Francis too without the name, honestly.
Right.
And at the center of the Francis papacy.
You're exactly right, but he did it. I'm thinking for a very clever reason, because right now you have to obfuscate this Francis II. You have to not let people see it right out. And so if people are leaning on Leo XIV, and he's in part Leo XIV because he does want to continue some sort of social revolution within the church. So it's this continuance of the social revolution of Francis, this synodal experience and everything else underneath that. But then it's a different direction from Leo XIII. So in a way, it's kind of signaling, and that's exactly. That's my reading of it. I hope, and let me say this again, guys. I hope to be proven wrong. I want so badly to be proven wrong. And we should continue to pray for this man. Anything can happen. So when we're here giving our analysis, nothing is set in stone. There's the present, there's the past, and then there's the future. We cannot ignore the past and then basically just not consider that at all. We have to hope, right? And so we hope that the things he's done in the past are indeed the things of the past,
right?
And we look.
I think that's well said. I think that's well said, and we do have to pray for him. I have been asking these questions to people, and I've been insufficiently informed on how this whole process works for the Benevicantes and the Sedivicantes. Okay, so I have now seen today, and by the way, sometimes I float in that world too, because hell, I mean, how can Francis have been a pope? How? Right? Okay, well, he's dead, so I guess we don't have to talk about it anymore. But for the people who really This man was pronounced true pope by Sedevacantis on Twitter, and then later on, no, he's not a pope anymore. The seat is still vacant. And I would like to understand, number one, for the Benevicantis types, like the Father Nixes. Like, okay, is this guy a legit pope now or not? Like, is the seat, you know what I mean? Because they thought there were irregularities
Ultimately,
in the
I
conclave
think
or whatever.
Benevicantism is just going to be less and less relevant, frankly, at this point, because they
less relevant. When was it relevant?
I mean, was it ever relevant? I mean, in their circle, in their minds, it was. But I mean, but now, even in their own mind,
Adrian, I want to tell you that like half of the conservative Novus Ordo were Benevicantists. I was going to blow your mind. No, I know.
there were a lot. There were a lot, and of course, I was famously against them. They all hate me to the umpteenth degree because my article in 1 Peter 5 is still cited against them all the time. So they hate me. But beside that,
such a cope.
You know, it's like, but that's less relevant. I mean, really, what are these guys going to do now? You know, your Father Nix, your what's I can't remember the name that one particular intellectual that was really big.
Dave Mazza, Ed Mazza.
Yeah, Ed Mazza.
Yeah.
You know, what was he going to do now? All right,
Mazza
now
must be
so,
happy.
So now
he must
Francis
be joyful.
is dead.
Like,
Benedict
imagine
is
being
dead.
fatherless.
What does he do now? Do you accept the new guy? It's like, is there like a progression that has to happen?
No, I am firmly convinced now that this will put them in the direction of actually becoming a real Sedevacantists.
Right.
Because now they're going to be going back and going,
I respect a lot more than the Benevicantis position. Like just
something a little bit more.
Because the Sedes, for whatever I disagree with them on, they've got principles
consistent.
And they follow their principles.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I respect them for that. It was a while. I had to basically, I was seeing Francis and saying, okay, I get it.
This is my question though, Ryan.
Where you're
my
at.
question,
I'm not going to hate on you anymore.
But you must have seen the same thing that I saw today. And to be honest, I was driving across the country today, so I didn't see a lot. But what I did see was the people who were paying the closest attention to every single detail of this thing were the SETIs. Like, guys,
that's true.
Why do you care?
That's true.
Why do you care?
It's like, why would you care?
I did notice that.
On it.
I did notice that.
Were they expecting like literally St. Peter to come down and say,
oh, maybe they were.
This is a real pope? Like, is that their theory?
I know they're well, if I'm going
cool.
by Novus Ordo watch, Mario Dirksen. I mean, I respect the guy at a certain level, but he's more on it for taking the victory laps and whatnot. Then there's the WM review, which I have major respect for.
Me too.
I like them.
Catholic,
I like them.
Same here.
Praise, loves people, very charitable, wonderful person to deal with in every possible way. They had a good write-up about Prevost, actually, and and putting things together, and really just for the standpoint of educating people.
Yeah.
Not for taking the victory lap, not for, hey, you guys, and just to put this out there. This is what you need to know. And again, not saying, hey, you guys are all losers and schismatics and heretics and you're all going to hell, and like a Diamond Brothers type video, No, he was, they're super wonderful to deal with, honestly. WM Review, it's like the best sedes on Twitter.
I would actually recommend people out there go follow them on Twitter.
I do, and they produce great content that's not even related to Sedevacantism. So I recommend them all the time.
I try to read everything that they put out. I think they're great. I love interacting with them. I have the same experience with you. I don't know what are the marks that they're looking for.
Yeah, I don't know
because a lot of people, at least with the whatever the word is, there's that theorem.
Cassiacum thesis.
Okay, so at least with that thesis, these people who they hold to be not real cardinals could still somehow elect a real pope. So I think those people were paying attention, and they're like, okay, we're waiting to see if they elect a real pope. But then what are the criteria or the marks that they're looking for by which they decide whether or not
because I was doing a little bit of thinking about
argument. Then they'd have to say he'd have to be reconsecrated. Among other things, even if he totally rejected Vatican II and whatever else is missing in their mindset, if they're accepting the 68 ordination right argument, then they'd argue he would still have to be reconsecrated in order to be a valid pope. And then if that were done, then they'd be like, okay, he's our pope by all the principles that they've laid down. If he was still confessing, pre-Vatican II faith or whatever.
Right. And the reality here is every baptized Catholic who is male can become Pope.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so they, in their minds, are probably thinking, well, one of these men, if they profess to be Catholic and they're baptized, hopefully, or they claim to be baptized, the idea is that everything can be added on. You can now become a priest, old rite. You can now become a bishop again, old rite, like you just laid out, Ryan, and then you can now become a cardinal. You don't even have to become a cardinal, right? You can just go from bishop to pope. So I don't know if that's. I think the hope is that there is some sort of conversion that happens on the inside of these conclaves, that they actually do eventually elect a true believing Catholic, someone who's going to say, "Well, you know what? I've done a lot of thinking. I'm just giving you their thought.
No, I know. And I'm probably within the. Well, I don't know if this is true, but I was going to say within the four of
dial
us,
back there, buddy.
I don't even know if this is true, but I'm very sympathetic to their arguments. I may be the most sympathetic to their arguments on this stream. Now,
I'm
Alberto's not here,
sympathetic,
so
but not as much as you are. But I am sympathetic to it, and that's why, I even came on the stream like a couple of years ago and apologized to Sedevacantists because it used to be.
I remember.
I'd get in hard with them, tell them you're going to hell, you're outside the church, whatever. And now I'm like, no, you're Catholic.
No, you're fine.
I was wrong.
You guys are cool. Even Bishop Schneider's
I get it.
Cool.
I don't agree with you, but I get it.
Okay, so but however, I just don't understand. And I would love to understand, and maybe it's just that it's so complicated that I can't understand it, or maybe it's too simple. I don't know. But I want to know who has the authority, or who's going to decide. Let's say that Cardinal Prevost makes a solid act of profession in the public tomorrow. Is that sufficient? Or an act of faith? Sorry. Is that sufficient?
I would think so, because if he is now emphatically, publicly saying that he does profess the one true Catholic faith, then that would be sufficient enough. If people look to him to be Leo the 14th, that is sufficient enough. To make that happen.
You still have the issue of the 68 ordination rite or consecration.
Well, no, but
they would say,
again,
okay, professing the right to be Catholic, but he's not really a bishop, so he's got to actually be consecrated for us.
No, yeah, but that goes without saying. The fact is, they want someone who professes himself to be a Catholic, right? And that's
okay.
That's
now,
the linchpin.
Listen, I have to apologize to you, gentlemen, for two. Number one, I have to go here in a minute, and I just have one comment I wanted to tell you. Number two, I gave the Seddies way more airtime than they deserve. So I'm sorry I brought it. I shouldn't have done it. Mea culpa.
You brought it up.
I forgive you.
I did. I went out of my way to bring it up. I stopped for lunch today near Chicago.
Oh boy! Did you cause this whole thing? Did you cause this thing?
Yep,
Mr. Parrott.
I will.
Forget Taylor Marshall. Mike is at fault.
Yeah.
Marshall's chilling in Rome, but I'm in the guy's hometown. So who's got the scoop? Who's got the real scoop, Marshall?
Right.
Okay, so I'm at this barbecue joint, right? And the guy with the pierced, whatever, is serving us, and he's talking to the girl who's behind the bar and whatever, and they're both saying, "This is kind of crazy. It's a Chicago Pope." It's a Chicago, we have our own Pope. I never
Chicago pizza for a Chicago Pope.
Yeah, and these people were legit. These people did not look Catholic at all. Okay, they're probably bogus ordo, but they were so excited about the prospect of one of their fellow city. He went to Villanova, he went to such and such high school. They were figuring out this guy's life.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's good to have an American Pope. I actually don't think that it is. What are we, the Roman Empire now? We rule everybody militarily and financially and religiously or whatever. But it was really an interesting thing to see a bunch of worldlings who were getting into the new Pope's biography because they could relate to him. It's weird.
No, it's weird, and that's what I've been thinking about for the most part of today. Is basically I have friends who went to Villanova. I mean, I could take a drive right now to Villanova today and see where the Pope went to college, basically.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and there's a picture also making the rounds today of the current pontiff meeting the former pontiff John Paul II. And I don't know if you've all seen that picture today, but there's that out there as well.
Yeah, I did see that actually.
Yeah, interesting. Are we going to land this plane because my schedule does not permit me to go much further?
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna do our best. Where did I want to go? I just there was one thing I was just going to mention in terms of like what's our criterion for he's now professing the faith, because like you missed it because you were later, but in the intro I did a montage of basically everyone from Pius 12th wasn't him stepping on the loggia. It was just a generic thing of Pius 12th coming in on the Sedia Gestatoria. But after that, it was every pope subsequent to that coming out of the loggia. John the 23rd, right? So Sedevacantist hold it really strongly. John the 23rd wasn't a real pope, etc. What Catholic present when John the 23rd stepped in the loggia said this guy's not a real pope? What guy knew? How manifest was this heresy that everyone that said, he's not a real pope, but that there was even a single Catholic, including the author of the Cassiacum Thesis, Gerard de Laurier, did a single person doubt that John the 23rd was the Pope? No, nobody doubted. Not one person. All the theologians, the canonists, best of the best, people absolutely fluent in Latin, well-read in theologians. Gerard de Laurier himself, the author of the Cassiacum Thesis, was there. He didn't doubt John the 23rd was the Pope. He was not at that point.
It's complicated.
What is the criterion for saying this guy's not a real pope? And at this point,
it may not be
modernism. We see it on the back end now.
Yeah.
But
well, that's
suppose the pope converted, like we were arguing earlier.
You may not be able to see it
right away,
contemporaneously.
Yeah,
and that's so I think I see what you're saying. It's not like you can visually identify the fact, like when he steps out, you can't look at the guy and say, "Oh, wait, no, that's not a pope." There's not a visual marker there,
right? But
so it's a behavioral.
Yes, let me piggyback on what you're saying, Mike. There's a sense of the faithful, right? There's a sense of the faithful.
Sensus fidei.
Yes, exactly. And then when there is a lot in the bank, obviously people were removed from papal criticisms and back then to a large degree, and so people were desensitized to, or actually we're not even sensitized to the idea of criticizing whatever the Pope did per se. But then when you start basically taking things out of the bank, and John the 23rd basically started that whole thing with having the church join the World Council of Churches, so you start adding things like that, and then people start taking a further look and looking in the direction, giving Auriol, the Freemasonic president of France, basically, pictures are emerging, a lot more is emerging, and then the council is called, and then people start seeing the direction the council is going, and then people start wondering what happened in 1958. Let's go back and see what happened in 1958. Why was there multiple, black smoke, white smoke, black smoke, white smoke? What is going on? And then you arrive at Paul VI in the same, or John the First, not really John the First, I suppose, Paul VI, and you start to question again. Something is off here, and you from Paul VI, you ask yourself, wait a second, let's go back and revisit John the 23rd. And then
that's the counter. That's the counter argument for Ryan. And I know you've considered this, Ryan. So I'm not going to tell you anything you've never heard. But if in 10 or 50 or 100 years a pope looks back and says, "Oh, by the way, Francis was an anti-pope," just so you guys know, I'm declaring it so. Like none of us would be surprised. Zero surprise.
No, But that's kind of my guiding line: is the universal church is going to tell me.
Yeah. You're 100%. You're 100% correct. We can't make that, proclamation, obviously, but we can see for ourselves certain things that tell us, through the sense of faithful that we have, the sense of fidelity that we have, that something is at least off. Right. We can at least put that marker out there. Something is off,
and that's where we're again respect for the Sedevacantists. They're seeing the same things we're seeing, and they're just applying principles. I don't agree with all those principles, but they're applying them and they're being faithful to them. The 1958 Sedes, anyway, the ones they're saying, let's go back to Pius XII. And although I got issues with Pius XII, to be
of course we are, of course.
That being said, it's
I want to make a quick programming note.
They're seeing the modernism and it's encroaching. Okay, well, where do we go back where it all started? And they're just trying to look at this and saying, okay, so hey. Pius XII, that's our last pope where we're sure he's a Catholic pope. And it's like, I get that. I get where they're coming from. I get.
By the way, he won. He won on the first ballot.
Yeah, he did, actually.
Imagine that. Imagine walking in and winning.
Wait,
that's like a walk-off home run.
Yeah, well,
Pius XII
he was
won
basically running the entire papacy for Ratti, for Pius XI at the end.
Yeah.
So he was in, and the war was already, kicking off, and he was the guy. He was the guy. There was no doubt. There's every once in a while that you get that in history where like there's this one guy who's like he's the center of things. He is the guy we need, and everyone knows it, and it's immediately done just because he's the guy we need. And like in the 13th century, that was Gregory VII.
Yeah.
And that's why it would be very difficult. Quick programming note. I tried to pivot away from the Sedes. I said we gave them too much airtime. We're still going.
I know. We're giving right back to them.
Not my fault, but I will say it's hard to say. If you were a Sedi, you have to draw the line at 58 because there's no way you say Pius XII is not legit. No matter what your issues are with him, you can't say that. The guy was running Pius XI's pontificate and he won on the first ballot. Like that's it.
Yeah, well, got way well if it started in 1789. That's not wrong either in a certain way. But it's
Oh, don't show me why.
Although, I mean, if you follow Sede principles, if the guy's not really Catholic, and you look at Pius XII and you look at what he did in terms of all the modernists get in under Pius XII. It's like on the one hand he talks really strong against modernism, on the with the other hand he lets them all in, lets them get everything they want in terms of scripture scholarship, in terms of liturgy. I mean, especially with anyone who's going to make the argument that like quo prima forbids any change in the liturgy, and therefore the Novus Ordo is invalid because they try. Well, so is Pius XII's Holy Week. Then sorry, Pius XII's Holy Week is a far more radical break from the tradition in liturgy than it's at least equal with the Novus Ordo in terms of like that specific element, the changes that were made there. And if you're going to argue that my mic's gone, quo primum is infallible and the Pope can never change the liturgy, well, Pius XII can't be a real Pope then if that's your criterion, because I mean what he did with the Holy Week liturgy was at least as dramatic, in terms of Holy Week as the Novus Ordo is for the wider liturgy. I mean, there's so many changes, arbitrary, and it really was the run through for the Novus Ordo. You look at so many things they introduced in the Pius XII Holy Week, Our Father in Common, priests facing the people for so many orations and so many prayers, and just arbitrary changes. And now the laity are instructed to do this or that thing. That's all the prep, for the Novus Ordo, really. And although actually, I'm going to say White Wolf, this is not true because I've seen the documentary evidence. Bonini was the understudy for the older modernists on the Pian Commission. This is where, Bonini cut his teeth, learning from the older modernists. And so he would employ all the same stuff from the Pian Holy Week Commission in the Novus Ordo. But he was not the architect of the Pius XII changes. So there's other people that were involved in that. And he was like the younger understudy for all that business. He wasn't the mover and shaker. and that's clear because I've seen a lot of these documents in terms of like when I was in the Vatican, and the Pian Concilium, and Bonini was not the guy who established all this stuff, but he was definitely the mover and shaker. He was overseeing a bunch of stuff, and he's learning from the guys who had been taking modernism, putting it in more covert ways, like through liturgy. And that was part of what they saw, is that, yeah, we can have, we got all this pressure. We can't be modernists and outright publicly, or else we'll be excommunicated. But we can do it more subtly through the liturgy. And that's where, yeah. And Cassell's huge influence. Oda Cassell is a huge problem, actually, in so many ways. But, but Bonini was not, and when you get in the documents, he's not the one making the recommendations. Bonini's overseeing it. His role is more perfunctory, and he's learning. And then when he is back in power under after John the 23rd, because John the 23rd hated Bonini, and that's another fun thing. It's like John the 23rd totally took Bonini out of everything, and then you get to Paul VI, and Bonini is right back in, and now he's got the experience and the time, and then he starts employing all the same stuff on a wider scale to the liturgy, and he's manipulating Paul VI at one level, and that's not to completely exculpate Paul VI, but he's only part of the problem. Like Bonini is doing one thing on one end, and feeding him stuff, and then Bonini's doing stuff on the other end, and then this is the reform of the liturgy you wanted. He's like, well, you guys went way beyond, like, and you got Louis Bouillet, who's kind of like disconcerted about some of the stuff that's coming out of this thing, and then Paul VI is like, why are you doing all this stuff? Well, because the undersecretary Annibale Bonini told us that this is what you wanted. And Paul VI is like, well, I didn't want that. It's in Bonini, it's in Bouillet's memoirs. And it's like he played both sides perfectly. He learned all that in the Pian Concilium, the way they played Pius XII, and told him, hey, we're restoring this, restoring that. And Pius XII said, well, why are you doing this? Well, we were told you wanted it. He's like, well, I didn't want that. And then he sees it, but it is represented to him by various people. And that's the thing with Pius XII. If you had a PhD, you're a science guy. You're the chief doctrinal guy. I need to listen to you. And that's the way he was. Like, Pius XII loved technology, loved science, loved all these things. And so if you were a PhD and you were like a real serious academic, he was just in awe of you, and you had the last word with him, period. And that's one of the problems that you have in Pius XII's reign. That's how they, like with scripture scholarship, they were able to junk the Vulgate and get rid of that, because like the principle of the Vulgate in scripture scholarship was that you got whatever from the Greek and the Hebrew. The manuscripts are not absolutely certain, even though in theory the Greek and the Hebrew are the true inspired things that are inerrant, but the actual text criticism has to go in to determine what really is the Greek and the Hebrew that's inerrant. And then the new scripture scholars that were coming around that wanted to use historical criticism in so many things, they're the ones saying, well, what do we need the Vulgate for? It's just a Latin translation. Whereas you look at the traditional use of the Vulgate in the Western Church, it's like you get whatever from the Greek and the Hebrew. In the Vulgate, it's like this is an ancient witness to what they believed and how they understood the scripture. So that's like the gold pan. And so whatever you get from the Greek and the Hebrew that should be there stays in the pan, and whatever shouldn't be falls out. And that's how they approached it. But after Pius XII, it all goes away. And then so that prepares the way for completely jettisoning the Vulgate after Vatican II. And you get the Nova Vulgata, which is an absolute train wreck as a text, completely obliterates all the really sensible and good scholarship that was going into revising the Vulgate text. And now, and they even have sections of the Nova Vulgata that were, like in the Old Testament especially, came from a French translation of the Greek or the Hebrew, and then reworked into Latin. And that's the text you got in the Nova Vulgata, not the propriety of the original Vulgate text. It's such a train wreck at so many levels. And I could pontificate about that as the day is long. Adrian, what else do you got before we quit?
Tons of stuff, but it's late. There's a number of things. I just found a clip of Bishop Strickland basically talking about it with Glenn Beck. James Martin put out a video.
Put it on.
Yeah, put it in the chat. But I don't know if we want to take any more time. We're already almost at 2 hours. And then Timothy Gordon put out a video where the brother of Leo the 14th says that he was alerted. He said, quote, "I heard he was a finalist in a group of 3 roughly a day or 2 after the Pope died."
Wow.
That's politicking. And I'm pretty sure that's an excommunicatable offense. That's very concerning.
Depends on how it's done.
Yeah, exactly. So
in the terms of UDG, but
Yeah.
That would be. Yeah, I mean, but it was the same thing. The thing is, too, is like the way that UDG. It's that historically speaking, there's always some amount of politicking.
right, but there's never a
But are
law in
you
place to
yourself
excommunicate
doing
you for
that?
doing so.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, because the whole point of UDG is getting to we want to allow the Holy Spirit to inspire us and enlighten us by us choosing the candidate we think will be the most beneficial for the church. Now, realistically, historically, there's a mix of politicking, and then there's always like an awareness. We need, you get different points with Gregory the Seventh, with an Adrian the Seventh, with Pius the Fifth. We need or Marcellus II. We need a holy pope. We need a pope that is a truly holy pope to come in and rule. And then sometimes it's like in Marcellus II, is St. Robert Bellarmine's uncle. There's the sense we need a holy pope. He's the guy, and he dies after 30 days. It's like, God, come on, this is the guy. And then you get Julius III, who's like a throwback to the Renaissance papacy. His contemporaries argue that he had made a young man a cardinal in order to bugger him, and like his 14, 15-year-old, he was like, he's a pedo. And Julius III was a canonist, but he definitely spends a lot of time with this guy. By all contemporaneous reports, not modern stuff read back in. It's all a contemporaneous witness for Julius III. It's like, God, what are you doing here? Marcellus II, who's like his family members are putting on silk. They think they're going to get elevated and put in the Vatican hierarchy anytime. And he's like, no. And he tells all of his family members, you're forbidden from approaching Rome on pain of excommunication, because I am not running a nepotistic regime. We're running a regime for the church. And then he dies in 30 days.
Yeah. And Bishop Strickland, basically, the important quote from him in that segment was, he said, quote, "As head of the Congregation for Bishops, frankly, in my opinion, he, Cardinal Prevost, made some really bad choices there. He was involved in naming bishops that I find very troubling, so we'll have to keep praying." So he was involved in the choosing of bishops. Now he has the final say in the matter. So we should definitely be concerned about that as well. I think we should definitely go into this pontificate with both eyes open, get prayed up, pray the rosary every day. If we have not done the first 5 Saturdays, time to start the 100th anniversary for the 5 first Saturdays is this December. So if you've never done the 5 first Saturdays, or if you've already done them in the past, the blasphemies against Our Lady are here more than ever before. Our Lady of Fatima is our only hope. I was talking to my brother about this earlier today, and he was saying, I don't see how there's any solution to the problem today. All the cardinals are going to be appointed by either Francis or Francis II, and that's it. And then how are you ever going to get a quote-unquote conservative pope ever again? And I was very clear, like, look, the hope springs eternal from God, not in man. I know there's no solution.
Why did Christ say that I will be with you always? And he is with us through the presence of the Holy Ghost guiding the church. That doesn't mean directly stage managing the church, or like that false idea, well, the Holy Ghost chooses the Pope. And
that's absurd.
You can't do anything, it's totally absurd. But God is still guiding the church.
God is still guiding the church.
And again, who knows if Pope
and my hope is in the message of Fatima. My hope is in the promise of the triumph of the Immaculate Heart and the reign of Mary. And so that's where my hope is. That's why I'm not dooming. That's why I'm not upset. That's why I'm not freaking out about it.
Be realistic, but also, you know, and like we've noted the shortcomings of this particular individual, Prevost, and everything. We still don't know what he's going to do any more than we knew what Bergoglio was going to do. And so, I mean, even according to like knowing who he was, you still had no idea what he was going to do ultimately in terms of the, you know, the last 12 years of the papacy. So it's, although I do have to address this, I don't absolutely believe the memoirs of Vaticanesti with 100% faith, but as an historian, that's my source. And you have to, and again, with all historical sources, primary sources, you have to sift, you have to look at the conditions of writing in, who's paying them to write, whether they're being paid to write, you know, what's their motivations. That's the truth of all history. You know, you have to sift your sources. You might have the primary sources and they're giving you stuff, but you still have to work with what you got and look at it like a human being, because that's why history is not physics. History is social studies. You know, it is human beings.
If White Wolf has other sources, he can provide them so you can get more data.
Exactly. I mean, the more data is better, you know, and the more, especially from the contemporaneous data, and then we try to form from what we can, and then based on what they actually did that are established facts, we try, you know, historian tries his best to derive what actually happened in those times. It's not enough to say, oh, here's a primary source, so this is absolutely what happened. Well, no, this is a primary source telling us what he saw happened, and now we can apply this to archaeology, you know, the facts, the things that we know for a fact happened. Same thing with battles, same things in military history, same things with other things, and there's things that are insoluble in history. You just can never get the actual thing, and there's things that'll be overturned. You know, like I mean, just the Battle of Agincourt. Everyone thinks it's like, oh, it's the English longbowmen. They kill all the French. That's not true at all. And we know that now. We know it by a combination of archaeology and the primary source data, both on the English and the French side, which is that the arrows slowed down, the mud slowed down the French infantry. The arrows actually didn't penetrate the armor, but the English infantry with their bill hooks and their other devices for getting in all the joints of armor pulled down the French knights, dragged them off to hold for ransom. And, you know, the slaughter happens because Henry V thinks he's under attack on a rear guard wing, and actually isn't, but at the time he thinks he's under attack, so he orders the slaughter of the captives. And so they end up killing, guys don't want to do it because they want to get the money out of it, but they end up killing all their captives. So the slaughter of the French nobility is, you know, it's not really his fault, because he thought he was under attack from a rearguard wing of the French. Actually, it was this reinforcements coming up, and he didn't realize it. So, you know, so there's that. And but, you know, the traditional thing, oh, the English longbow, you know, took out all these French knights. That's not how it happened. You know, the bodkin arrow, you could barely penetrate the armor. They've done scientific tests on it, so we know. And the primary sources tell us what happened. They dragged them down with their bill hooks and other devices, halberds and things, and then started cutting in through the armor, and then would hold these guys at ransom, and then they end up being killed because of this particular thing I mentioned. That's just like a little thing in a military history bit but people still have this popular idea. It was the English longbowmen in Agincourt that did it. And that's actually not the case at all. The longbowmen kept the infantry from coming in and being, you know, a thing until later. They, you know, so you apply that across the board for any source you've got in any event, political, military, general, whatever. You know, it's like you've got to parse your sources. You've got to be careful with your sources. No source is absolutely true. Just because it's your source, you got to evaluate your source. So, and that'll be the case for people 100 years from now, looking back at the election of Leo XIV. So, all right, I guess with that, we will leave you with Pope Pius XII speaking in English. God bless you all. Pray for the Holy Father, for Leo XIV. Obviously, if you're a sedevacantist, you don't believe he's really the Holy Father, pray for him anyway. And pray for the Holy Church, and go to First Saturdays, go to First Fridays, go to confession.
Pray the Rosary.
Pray the Rosary every day for the triumph of the Immaculate Heart. God bless you all.
Bestow, O Lord, on those who are suffering persecution for the faith, thy spirit of fortitude, to unite them inseparably with the Christ and his church. Arouse in the hearts of those who call thee Father the hunger and the thirst for social justice and for fraternal charity in deeds and in truth. Grant, O Lord, peace in our days, peace to souls, peace to families, peace to our country, peace among the nations.
I have 2 shotguns in my home. They're locked in a safe. There's a metal gun case. We live in an area that's wooded, somewhat secluded. And I've said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony and fire 2 blasts outside the house.
Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun.
You don't need a machine gun. You don't need 30 rounds.
Buy a shotgun. Buy a double-barrel
shotgun.
No, you don't need a flamethrower, and you don't need a tank. You don't need an AR-15 to scare those thugs away. No, and I don't need a grenade launcher. I don't need an F-15. There's just one thing I need to do, and they'll stay away from me.
Fire 2 blasts outside the house.
Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun.
Buy a shotgun.
Buy a shotgun, baby.
You don't need a machine gun.
You don't need a machine
gun. You don't
gun.
need 30 rounds.
Buy a shotgun. Buy a double-barrel
shotgun. Fire 2 blasts outside the house.
Buy a shotgun. Buy a shotgun.
You don't need a machine gun. You don't need 30 rounds.
Buy a shotgun. Buy a double-barrel
shotgun.